Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I would like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series sponsored by Affiliated Monitors on strategies for corporations and corporate compliance programs under the new DOJ guidance issued in 2018. First, a word about Affiliated Monitors. Founded in 2004 and celebrating its 15th anniversary this year, indeed this month, Affiliated Monitors provides professional, independent integrity monitoring and ethics and compliance assessments nationally and internationally and across almost all industries. With its knowledge of effective ethics and compliance programs and cultures, Affiliated Monitors is respected for its work as the corporate monitor on matters ranging from multinational corporations to small and mid-sized companies and even individuals. Having served in over 700 monitorships, no one has more experience as an independent monitor than the team at Affiliated Monitors. For more information on how an independent monitor can help improve your company's compliance and ethics program, please visit our sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, at their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. Over the course of this 5-part podcast series, we'll discuss some of the new DOJ guidance that came out in 2018, what companies can do with it both internally and externally, how a strong compliance program can be used as both a sword and a shield, and what are the benefits of using a third party to fulfill your compliance mandate. In this episode 2, Vin DiCiani takes a look at what companies can do internally with this information. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode in our 5-part exploration of strategies for corporations under the new DOJ guidance. Today, I have with me Vin DiCiani. Vin is the founder and CEO of Affiliated Monitors. Vin, first of all, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to visit with me today.
Good to speak with you again, Tom.
So, Vin, I'm really excited to speak with you over the next couple of podcasts because this is going to go into what not only interests me as the nuts and bolts guy, but I think is the most significant for the compliance practitioner and compliance programs. And the Benczkowski Memo really lays out what companies can do to proactively, during an FCPA enforcement action and investigation, move forward to come out with the best possible result at the end. So in this podcast, I wanted to look at what can companies do internally. So if I could start with, how do you see the remediation of continuing problems as a key issue for companies?
So I'm going to take a step back before that, because I think one of the things that the memo addresses is that, and it has been part of the evolution, right, of compliance and how DOJ looks at compliance programs, and that is, how strong is the program and is it real, right? There are no longer the days when a company could just wheel in its, hefty compliance program and throw it on the table and say, here it is, we got a compliance program, we're doing great things. Now, there's much more attention and seriousness on how strong the program is and if it's real or not. And I think the memo really does address what a company needs to do to demonstrate to DOJ that it does have a strong program. So the things that happened when Wei Chen was there in terms of assisting the DOJ in understanding what a strong program is and that it was real, I think that's one of the strongest elements that I take away from the memo. What a company needs to do to demonstrate that it's got a good program. And then to start talking about, remediation and strengthening of the program, the memo addresses that, right? So let's start off with the premise that the company has a program. Perhaps the company needs to assess whether or not that program is strong and effective and has any weaknesses. Let's go beyond that. Let's say that there is a problem that has been discovered somehow through either, one of the detection devices, a hotline, or somebody self-reporting, learning about a whistleblower or an external complaint or something from internal audit. What does the company do about it? Does it have the wherewithal to conduct an investigation, first of all, and determine whether or not it is something that has to be reported? But on the remediation side, has the company gone deep enough to find out what was the root cause of that problem? How did we get here, and what do we do to address it? So I think that the memo sort of talks about that and says, what are you doing to the problem that you're here for? When you're before DOJ, you got here, and what have you done? So I think that's one of the key elements here is how serious the company is taking its compliance program, and then what it's doing when there is a problem that has been discovered.
Then one of the things that the Department of Justice raised some time ago, as far back as the FCPA guidance, but I think now it's getting a little more front and center concern, is the strength of the investigation process. Could you explain what that means to you and how a company can demonstrate that?
Sure. So going back to what I was just saying, let's say there is a problem, something has surfaced, and however it got in front of the company, the compliance officer, something has surfaced. What does the company do about it? Does it, just cauterize it and say, one bad apple kind of thing, which we all have seen before, or does it do a deep dive into learning whether or not it's real and, the merits of it, and gathering information around that? Sometimes some companies have very strong internal investigation investigators and just a process. So in other instances, and again, this, they will delegate the investigation piece to someone who has no skills as an investigator. Might be somebody in HR, might be somebody who's a transactional attorney, all of a sudden is thrown into an investigation on something, and they just don't have the experience and the depth of knowledge and that kind of stuff. And so you end up with an investigation that is not that effective, which can lead to even further problems, right? So I think strengthening a company, and maybe the company recognizing that it doesn't have a strong investigative process, is sort of like recognizing that they may need to do that. But too many times a problem occurs, and if the company doesn't do a good job at the investigation, part of that, then you're just going to go down the wrong road. And we've seen it, with companies self-reporting when the investigation is thin, and it gets thrown back at them that they just missed too many things, and it doesn't help.
Ben, how does a company show or demonstrate the robustness of its disciplinary process? Is it simply just firing a few bad actors, or is it something more?
Yeah, this is something we have talked about, in previous podcasts, and that is enforcement of of discipline when there's a violation of an ethics matter or some type of internal control. And again, one of the weaknesses that we see in compliance programs is this whole issue of lack of enforceability and accountability. And companies do not sometimes want to discipline, the big breadwinner in the company, or the doctor who's a high level, earner, or brings in a lot of work to the hospital, or the salesman that is just kicking it through the roof, because they fear the loss of business. You're seeing this now in the sexual harassment cases, with some of these big players are now facing consequences where that was not the case before. So, for us, when we're looking at the strength of a program, are they disciplining people? And is that disciplinary process fair? Is it balanced? Is it done even-handedly? Does the discipline, sort of match the behavior? Those are key elements that we would look at, and then you can bet that Department of Justice is looking at it in terms of who got disciplined for the behavior that occurred, right? So I think that is a very important element.
And I'm not sure this next point is tricky or not, but it's always certainly important, which is the actual reform of your ethics and compliance program. What's the best way for a company to go about that on the internal side?
So one would think that compliance and the compliance function is doing some type of assessment of itself. right, to determine whether or not there are some weaknesses in the program or not. Sometimes internal audit will be looking at elements of the compliance program and the function. Does the company look at itself? And they can do it internally, and later on, in another segment, we'll talk about externally. But what is the company doing internally to make sure that the company is emphasizing sort of the right, things within the program? Whether or not the company is, again, it has appropriate training for staff, and they're not training some staff on antitrust when it has nothing to do with them. Does the company have, good sort of systems and controls in place related to third parties? They may have some words on a page, but they don't have necessarily good controls in place. And so is the company, looking at those kinds of things and making necessary improvements. One of the things we're seeing now as compliance matures and as companies have had compliance programs now 5, 10, 15 years, they can get stale. The laws can change, the regulations can change, but they keep sort of them static, right? And they're not necessarily looking at them to make, improvements. That's something that's where this, I think, is a key element, is the company assessing itself, in terms of the strength of the program and the function.
And then, Ben, what's the role of internal controls testing in this process?
So the way we look at sort of controls testing, it really goes to things like, does the company have a good sort of third-party flow-down process? Let's just focus on that for a minute. So what are the controls around that? For the FCPA matters, and when you have a sort of an anti-corruption program, what kind of controls do you have around cash? Do you have some kind of mechanism for determining where cash is being spent? Do you have some control over bank accounts, particularly when you're working in a variety of countries? Do you have some kind of control over who's making decisions about where dollars can be spent? All of those kinds of things require internal controls. And so internal controls, number one, establishing them, and number two, testing them to make sure that they're appropriate. And that's where internal audit can come in and test those controls to see that, number one, the controls are good and they're comprehensive, and then number two, that they're effective.
Well, Ben, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but I've been visiting with Ben DiCiani, the founder and president of Affiliated Monitors. Today, we've taken up the topic of what companies can do internally, and I hope you'll join us tomorrow for our episode of what companies can do externally. Ben, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and our exploration of strategies for corporations under the new DOJ guidance, which was issued in 2018. And I hope you'll join us again tomorrow for another episode. Please check out Affiliated Monitors at their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. Affiliated Monitors is the sponsor of this podcast. The podcast has been a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network.